At this very moment, someone you've lost is watching you, not as a metaphor, not as a soothing notion your grief created to help you rest. They are literally watching you. And according to Edgar Cayce, the man who performed more than 14,000 trance sessions and explained the workings of the afterlife with a precision that still defies scientific explanation, they don't simply see you the way you might see someone standing across a room. They see everything: your emotions, your secret thoughts, the fears you've never shared with anyone, the love you never expressed aloud, the regret you carry with you each and every day. They perceive all of it. And what Cayce revealed next about what the dead truly experience when they observe us is something that will remain with you long after this video concludes. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, something will change in how you view every person you've ever lost. Let's begin with what most people believe. When most people consider whether the dead can see us, they picture something like a ghost gazing through a window, a faint version of the person they knew, somewhere vaguely overhead, occasionally looking down, perhaps aware, perhaps not, maybe present at funerals and birthdays and weddings, then vanishing again. Cayce said this image isn't merely incomplete, it's almost entirely inaccurate. And the reason it's inaccurate stems from one basic misunderstanding about what consciousness truly is and what it becomes capable of when no longer filtered through a physical form. Here is what Cayce described. When you shed your physical body, you shed the limitations that accompanied it. Your eyes could only perceive a narrow spectrum of light. Your ears could only detect a fraction of surrounding frequencies. Your brain processed information slowly, one piece at a time, filtered through fear, filtered through ego, filtered through the haze of physical weariness and biological necessity. All of that disappears. And what remains is consciousness in its purest, unfiltered state. Consciousness that perceives not through physical organs, but directly, instantly, wholly. Cayce described the awareness of a soul that has passed over as being, in his words, vastly more acute than anything we experience in bodily life. Not dimmer, not hazier, sharper, more present, more complete. The departed, according to Cayce, don't see less than we do. They see incomparably more. And here is the first detail that made me pause entirely when I encountered it in his readings. The departed don't see your actions, not primarily what they perceive first. What registers most powerfully to a consciousness no longer constrained by physical filters is your emotional state, your vibrational frequency. Cayce described it this way. Imagine if every person you observed was enveloped by a field of color and light that revealed exactly what they were feeling. Not what they were saying, not what they were doing, what they were actually experiencing within. Joy radiates differently than sorrow. Fear has a different signature than tranquility. Love, genuine love, not performed love, produces a frequency that Cayce said is perceivable across dimensional boundaries in a way that nothing else is. When those you've lost observe you, the first thing they perceive is not your face, it's your state, your truth, the emotional reality you're holding right now in this moment. And then Cayce said something I contemplate constantly. He said, "Well, the departed can also perceive your thoughts. Not all thoughts, not the random mental noise that passes through everyone's mind each day, but the thoughts that carry genuine emotional weight, the ones you return to, the ones that form the deeper narrative of your inner life. The thought you have about someone you wronged 20 years ago and never made right. The love you feel for a child that is so immense it frightens you. The grief you carry for the person you lost that you've never fully allowed yourself to feel because you're afraid if you begin, you won't be able to stop. Those thoughts, those heavy, emotionally laden, firmly held internal experiences. Cayce explained they are visible to consciousness that has transitioned as plainly as you can view this screen right now. Now, an actual case, because this is where it moves beyond theory. In the documented records of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the organization that maintained and organized Cayce's work, there is a reading performed in the early 1940s for a woman who had lost her husband unexpectedly, a heart attack, no warning, no farewell. She came to Cayce gripped by one question she couldn't let go of, no matter how much she tried. Did he understand in those last moments how deeply she loved him? Did he understand, despite the disagreement they'd had the week before he died, despite the words spoken in anger that couldn't be taken back? Did he understand the truth beneath all of it? Cayce entered trance, and what emerged was this. Her husband was not only conscious of her love, he had been conscious of it in a way he had never been able to fully recognize while living. Because in physical existence, Cayce explained, we perceive each other through the haze of our own fears and needs and misunderstandings. We perceive the surface, we perceive the behavior, we miss the depth. On the other side of physical existence, that haze is gone. Her husband, Cayce said, now recognized the complete truth of what she had felt for him throughout their entire life together. Not just the love she'd expressed, the love she'd withheld, the love she'd been unable to convey. All of it visible, entirely for the first time. She left that session, according to the notes, unable to speak for several minutes, not from grief, from something that resembled relief so deep it had no name. But now here is the question that arises immediately from all of this. If the deceased can perceive us this clearly, are they always observing? Are they here constantly, present for every moment, every private struggle, every embarrassing Tuesday afternoon? Cayce approached this topic with great care, offering an answer far more nuanced than most people anticipate. He explained that the souls of those who have crossed over are not bound to us in the way we often imagine. They do not hover constantly, unable to move forward, trapped in endless observation of the lives they left behind. That description, Cayce noted, applies to the earthbound entity, the soul that became stuck at the threshold between worlds, unable to progress. This is an entirely different circumstance from the soul that is fully crossed over and continues evolving in higher realms. For these souls, which Cayce indicated represent the majority, their awareness of us is not continuous. It is deliberate, chosen. They come when they are needed, when the emotional frequency of someone they love rises to an intensity that reaches across dimensional boundaries. When grief runs deepest, when joy is at its purest, when a pivotal decision is being made that will shape the course of a life they care about profoundly, they choose to be present. In those moments, according to Cayce, their awareness of you is complete. Certain things summon them more powerfully than others, and Cayce addressed this directly. Prayer, focused prayer, conscious communication with someone who has passed, operates, by his account, as a frequency transmission that crosses dimensional boundaries more effectively than nearly anything else. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the intention and emotional force behind them. When you speak to someone you have lost, truly speak, not as performance, not as empty ritual, but as genuine direction of your consciousness toward them with real emotional significance. Cayce said they receive it every time, without exception. The signal reaches them. He also discussed dreams, and what he revealed about dreams will change how you sleep tonight. Cayce describes sleep as the singular state where the barrier between the living and the dead naturally grows thinner. Not dissolved entirely, but thinner. During sleep, the conscious mind loosens its hold on the fixed consensus reality it enforces throughout waking life. The filters drop, and in that condition, contact becomes achievable in ways that simply aren't possible when you're completely awake and guarded. Cayce explained, many dreams people experience of deceased loved ones, the ones that feel distinct from regular dreams, the ones that feel vivid and real in a manner that lingers with you for days, are not creations of the brain itself. They are genuine contact, the soul of the person you lost entering the frequency of your sleeping awareness and communicating through the only language available in that realm: image, emotion, symbol. He continued, the dreams where a deceased person appears utterly calm, completely at peace, and says something simple, something that feels less like dream conversation and more like a direct transmission. Those are the ones deserving the most attention. Because those, Cayce explained, are typically real. And here follows the second genuine case. A man approached Cayce following the death of his son. The son had died young in an accident, and the father was devastated by one particular and persistent thought, that his son had died frightened. That in those final moments there had been terror, and that terror was the last thing his son experienced. and that understanding was consuming the father from within. He had been having dreams of his son, but he rejected them as his own mind producing what he wished to see. He didn't trust them. He came to Cayce seeking something he could believe in. In trance, Cayce described the son's experience of those final moments in detail the father had never revealed to anyone. The particular quality of light in the room, the precise sequence of what the son perceived as consciousness shifted. And then Cayce made an observation about what the son had felt in those final moments, and it caused the father to rise from his chair. It wasn't fear. The son hadn't felt fear at all. Based on Cayce's reading, the shift had occurred so swiftly and so totally that what the son felt was more like surprise, followed by an immediate sensation of expansion, so immense and so unforeseen that there was simply no space for fear. The father asked how he could be certain this was genuine and not just something Cayce was inventing to ease his pain. Cayce replied, "Ask your son in a dream tonight and tell him you want to learn something that only the two of you would know." The father returned 3 days later. He didn't share what had taken place in the dream. He simply said, "I believe you." And he never came back to ask another question about his son's death because he no longer needed to. So what do the dead want from us? Because this is the subject Cayce came back to over and over again across thousands of readings. And it is the part that most of us misunderstand entirely. We assume that because grief is what we feel, the dead must share our grief, that they must be sorrowful about being gone, that they must long for us the way we long for them. Cayce said this assumption, however natural it may be, is almost completely inverted. The souls of those who have crossed over fully, who have passed beyond the threshold and entered higher realms of existence, do not experience loss as we do, because loss as we know it is grounded in separation. And from the vantage point of a consciousness that can perceive you directly, that can sense your emotional state as clearly as you sense your own heartbeat, that can be present with you in the moments that matter most, there is no separation, not in the way we conceive of it. What they experience, Cayce said, is closer to a profound ongoing care, a continued devotion to the people they loved, a wish, not frantic, not tormented, but genuine and constant for those people to thrive, to be complete, to keep living richly rather than halting at the moment of loss. And this is what Cayce expressed that crosses my mind whenever someone tells me they cannot move forward after losing someone dear to them. He said, "Your grief, true, profound, unresolved grief, does not honor the one you lost. It binds them. It forms an energetic connection between your suffering and their ongoing growth." He was not suggesting, do not grieve. He was not claiming the loss is unreal or the pain is illegitimate. He was explaining that the person you lost does not wish to be the cause of you ceasing to live. They do not want their absence to become a barrier between you and all that remains possible. What they desire, what Cayce explained, they express repeatedly through dream encounters, through signals, through the gentle nudges people sense at pivotal moments, is straightforward. Continue forward. Not away from them, onward with them. Still present in an altered form, still observing, still loving, still there in the moments that count in a way that needs no physical form to be real. The signals Cayce described are not spectacular. They are not thunderbolts or faces in the sky. They are subtle, exact, uniquely tailored to the individual receiving them. A song that surfaces in an unlikely setting at the precise instant you needed it. An item displaced, a light that blinks during a moment of turmoil with no electrical cause. A scent, a fragrance, a tobacco, a particular cooking aroma that enters a space with no material origin. A thought that comes in a voice unlike your own, bearing knowledge you could not have produced yourself. Cayce said, "These are not accidents, and they are not the morning mind creating solace. They are the departed using every possible avenue to cross the divide between where they exist and where you are. Because the distance from their perspective is not as vast as it appears from yours, and they are in their own way working constantly to close it." One final question, and I want you to sit with this rather than answer it right away. Has there been a moment since you lost someone when something occurred that you couldn't explain? Something small, something that no one else would understand if you tried to put it into words. Something that made you feel, just for a second, that the space between you and that person was not as final as death had made it seem. Most people have at least one of these moments. Most people dismiss them because the alternative, that they were real, is almost too much to bear. Cayce would say, don't dismiss them. He would say, those moments are not your imagination shielding you from grief. Those moments are the truth breaking through the only way it currently can. And the person you lost is on the other side of that moment, watching you decide whether to believe it. Write in the comments, have you felt it? A presence, a sign, a dream that was different from other dreams? Because you are not alone in this. And neither, according to everything Edgar Cayce spent his life trying to tell us, are.